Welcome to the Veterinary Marketing Podcast, where it's all about helping your veterinary practice attract, engage, and retain clients. Broadcasting a new podcast every Monday from sunny Southern California, here's your host, Brandon Bashirs.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to episode number 221 of the Veterinary Marketing Podcast. I hope you're having a wonderful day. In today's episode, we are going to be talking about some rapidly changing and I think very, very important privacy laws that are going to be affecting the way that we run ads in the future. Google has come out and made some changes to hop onto the privacy bandwagon. This has been a long time coming and is not a surprise, but I think that it's really, really important for us to be considering and thinking about this because it's going to really change the way that advertisers work. Facebook recently came out and said that advertisers who cannot track outcomes reduce their return on investment by as much as 60%. So ads have the potential to drop in return on investment if you don't know what you're doing. And so that's why I feel like it's so important to talk about this and to really make preparations for what is coming, because there are huge changes coming to ad platforms. So let's jump into today's episode. But before we do, I'd like to mention a few things. First, if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe in iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. And if you need any help, the best place to go is over to the Veterinary Marketing Nerds Facebook group, where you can ask for help, get collaboration, and there's a bunch of really cool and smart people over there. So head on over there. So as we begin today, I think that it's kind of important that we talk about where we are right now. So iOS 14 has really rocked the boat with privacy and with respect to privacy. Apple and Facebook are in a massive feud because Facebook doesn't have access to conversion data that's taking place. Google, not Google, but the Apple devices are blocking cookie tracking and not allowing conversion data to be tracked properly. Now, there's a bunch of tools that they've released. They've got a best practices guidebook that tells us that we have to verify our domains. We have to set up first-party cookie tracking. We have to use only a maximum of 7 standard conversion events. And those are some pretty big changes. So the way that it used to work was that you'd install a pixel on your site and Facebook would then track everything. And I mean, it was everything. It was incredible. I had several clients that were e-commerce clients, and they were selling stuff online and trying to get Google Analytics set up properly so that it would track revenue and conversion sources and all of these things was really time-consuming and cumbersome. And so it took seriously months to get everything dialed in perfectly. And I was poking around on Facebook's ad manager, and I saw that Facebook had actually already been tracking everything that I worked so hard to set up inside of Google Analytics. And it is incredible. So they were tracking conversion data, how many people buy on a frequent basis, what these different cohorts were worth, what the average transaction volume was. There was so much data inside there, I was blown away. So Facebook has been really aggressively mining data from everybody's sites that have conversion pixels on them. And that's been extremely beneficial for them because they're able to take all of this user data that they have on every single person using Facebook or Instagram or Messenger, and then they're able to apply insights on those people and give that benefit to advertisers. So they could say, okay, this person here is most likely a person who owns a dog and donates to charity and owns a house and, like all kinds of crazy data. They had, what month you purchase your homeowner's insurance in. That used to be a data point that you could advertise on, right? So that is cool from an advertiser standpoint, but people don't like having their privacy intruded upon. And so as a result, Apple has come out on a crusade to say, you know what, we're not going to let this happen. But it's really interesting because Apple is in fact tracking all of this data within your phone already. My suspicion is that they're going to be charging people for this information instead of just allowing it to happen. So there's a bunch of repercussions with this, right? Apple is taking a stance on privacy. They're with this, right? One of the biggest drivers of their platforms are apps and app developers. And so with having, all of your eggs in a basket of Facebook needs data from Apple users to, basically fuel their algorithms, to give their algorithms enough data to say, hey, these are good people to market to and these are good people to advertise to, because at the end of the day, Facebook is just an advertising platform. That's it. That's how they make money, right? They need to sell ad space. And so, as a result, they're in a pretty tough spot right now because Apple controls a huge percentage of the market, especially when it comes to high-end people to advertise to. People that have iPhones and Apple devices typically are on the higher end of the economic kind of scale, especially in the US, right? And so when we're looking at this, it's going to be a difficult thing because, number one, it's pretty complicated to get your pixels working to a point that they're actually working pretty well. And, I'm a professional marketer and I do this full time, and it wasn't easy to get everything set up for my clients and to make sure that our pixels are working and that they're receiving data and all of these things. So the average marketer is probably not updating their Facebook pixel, and that means that Facebook is losing out on a ton of data. Now, we knew that third-party cookie tracking and things were definitely not going to be around for a long time. In fact, Google said in 2018 that their Chrome browser was not going to support third-party cookie tracking. What is a third-party cookie and what is a first-party cookie? Let's talk about that really quick. So a cookie is just a little piece of JavaScript that you put on your web page, and a first-party cookie means that the person who owns the website is hosting that code and technically collecting that data. A third-party cookie means that the advertising company like Google or Facebook, they're hosting that. So the place where that data gets stored and put, if it's a first-party cookie, it's the person's website. If it's a third-party, it's the advertiser's website. So Google's able to do first-party cookie tracking with what's called Tag Manager, which is you host these tags on your server so that it's a first-party cookie. And that's kind of complicated, but just in general, right? First-party cookie means that it is the person's website. So if your website has a new Facebook pixel, if somebody visited that, Google would say, this is a first-party cookie. This isn't a third-party tracking cookie. So the theory behind that is if it's owned by the person who owns the website, it's not this massive advertising corporation that's collecting all this data on you. They're going to own that data technically, even though you don't own it. But that's kind of the thought behind it. So the push for privacy is pushing data away from these huge companies and more towards the small business. Now, iOS 14 disrupts that completely unless somebody opts in. And so there's just a bunch of repercussions on that. So how do we track marketing in the future? I think, number one, that we're going to have to not rely on the activity and the conversion tracking from Facebook or Google, because it's just not going to be very consistent. It's not going to work out the way that we want it to be working out. Google actually came out and said and made some significant announcements on March 3rd, and they are not going to be using the data that they're collecting from first-party cookies either here. And this is a pretty big announcement. What they've been doing since 2019 is testing what they call the privacy sandbox. And in the past, what they would do is collect data on everybody that is using Google Analytics, which is huge. I think it's something like 84% of websites on the internet have Google Analytics. So they have tons and tons of data. And they would put people into different segments, in different boxes based on their browser history and activity, right? And they're collecting so much data. And Chrome is the number one browser in the world as well. So you have people that are using Android phones, you have Chrome browsers, you have people with Google Analytics on their website, and this is feeding all of their data points. So they've changed the rules again, and they're not going to be using that data in the same way. And they've created what's called the federated learning of cohorts, which sounds like a Star Trek villain or something. But it's really, really interesting how they're just changing the way that people are measured, basically. And so instead of hosting this data of what people are doing and which buckets to put them in, basically, on Google's side, what they're going to be doing is using these different buckets and storing that data in your device or in your browser so that it's not going to be centralized, and they are putting some kind of barrier between your data and owning your data. So this is definitely interesting, an interesting approach to it. I think that this is going to probably be a good alternative to what they're doing right now. They say that they're going to be updating these buckets every 7 days. So these are going to be dynamic lists of people that you can target. If you're doing Google ads, for example, Facebook has not come out and said anything like this. I'm not sure what they're doing or what they're working on. But when we look at Google, we have a huge advantage when it comes to tracking and targeting, because we have people that are using Google Chrome, we have people that are using Google phones and Android iOS systems, right? They have a hardware system, they have Google Home devices, they've got all of this infrastructure that feeds these advertising platforms data. And so that is a much better position to be in than Facebook, which they have basically app products, and they're relying on these app products to then feed the advertiser base. So within veterinary medicine, we're still going to have, targeting options like physical location. We probably will have interests, right, which are going to be based on activity within the app. And then beyond that, we will have all of the, behavior-based retargeting lists and activity inside of these different apps and these different platforms. I think for me, within Facebook specifically, this makes retargeting lists that are native inside of Facebook a lot more important. It makes understanding which interests are the right ones to be targeting, because they're still going to have interest data. And then we need to be working to basically optimize for our CPMs, which are our cost per 1,000 impressions, or our cost per clicks. Because the conversion data that we're going to have, I think in the future, is just not going to be as accurate. And so if we're setting ourselves up now that we're just going to be targeting people for clicks and website traffic instead of conversion data, like we were able to do in the past, we're going to be ready for if the conversion data just is not populating and is not tracking properly. Because Facebook and Google are stuck in this battle, and they're not going to be going anywhere, for sure. So, Facebook actually de-verified Apple's Facebook page, which is really, really funny and petty, and I love it. But we're like in a weird war between all of these major tech companies, and there's going to be some serious and significant fallout from it. I'd be really interested to see if Apple just sells this data to Facebook, and that's totally possible, and that would be good for advertisers. It wouldn't be good for users necessarily if you want to have privacy and things. But I think that if you are running ads on Facebook, or if you're using Facebook or Instagram or any of Facebook's products or ad placements as a way to generate a lot of your traffic, I think it's 100% a smart idea to be diversifying into Google. We only really have two kinds of ad networks. Okay, we have two different types of behaviors that we can target, or two types of users that we can target. We can target people based on their demographics or psychographics, and that's called a contextual ad network. Or we can target based on their behavior, which are behavioral ad networks. So if somebody goes onto Google and they're searching, I think we're always going to be able to target those kind of things. But the data that we have with knowing that this person's birthday is in June and that they have 3 dogs because they're always on Petco buying stuff, and they also shop at Chewy and all these other sites, right? That kind of data, which is demographics and psychographics, is probably going to get less and less if the current trends stay with like this push for privacy and things. And I just think it's really interesting and important to be thinking about, especially with this most recent Google ad discovery that they said we're going to be turning into the federated league of cohorts instead of using federated learning of cohorts instead of using the affinity audiences and in-market segments, as they were called in the past. So I hope that this was helpful for you, and I think that veterinary hospitals and local businesses are in a far better position than companies like Bank of America or massive companies that are trying to sell products online nationwide, because so much of the data that they need to use is not going to be available, or it's going to be a lot less reliable. So just a few things to think about. Always work on diversification of traffic. Don't put all of your eggs in one basket. There's always going to be behavioral type ads that are going to work for veterinary hospitals. And then beyond that, build your native audiences, build native engagement, get people to take activity within the app so that you're able to remarket and sell to the people that are going to be the right kinds of people. I hope this makes sense. Please let me know if you have any questions. Don't forget to, if you have anything, the best place to go and ask a question and reach out is in the Veterinary Marketing Nerds Facebook group. Have a great day, and I'll see you on the next episode. Bye, everybody.